Guitar strings are the cheapest tone upgrade any player will ever make, and yet most players rotate through the same 3 or 4 names: Ernie Ball, D'Addario, Elixir, out of pure habit and never look past them. Walk into almost any shop, and the string wall tells the same story everywhere you go. Rows of familiar packaging repeating the same handful of brands in every gauge, from 9s to 10s to 11s. It's easy to assume that's simply what exists, that the entire market begins and ends with whatever a local shop happens to stock by the register. It doesn't. Some of the strings actual working musicians reach for, the ones behind entire eras of recorded tone, the ones Jimi Hendrix was quietly obsessed with, aren't sold anywhere near that wall. We went looking for the sets most players walk straight past without ever noticing, and what turned up changes the entire calculation. Here are 10 guitar string sets that quietly do things the big names, Ernie Ball, D'Addario, Elixir, never will. Some built by companies most players have genuinely never heard of, counting down from 10 to the one worth changing your whole rig for. If you love content that digs past the same 3 names every string wall pushes on you, hit the subscribe button because it helps these videos reach the players who are tired of settling for whatever happens to be in stock. Number 10. Kalium's Hybrid Balanced Tension Strings. Kalium started life as a small Southern California outfit called Circle K Strings, built specifically for players the mainstream brands had given up on: 7 and 8 string guitarists, drop-tuned bassists, anyone running a fanned fret instrument where a standard gauge chart simply doesn't apply. Their whole catalog exists because balanced tension sets in unusual gauges used to be almost impossible to find, and the company sells single strings running from a thin 9 all the way up to a bass-sized 130, gauges most manufacturers never bother stocking. A player tuning a 7-string down to a low B or lower could either accept a low string that flops around like a rubber band, or hunt down single strings from 3 different companies and hope the tensions matched. Kalium builds the whole set around the math instead, calculating exact tension per string so the low end feels as tight and controlled as the high strings. If your rig has ever needed a gauge that simply doesn't exist on a normal shelf, something between a standard 10 and 11 or a custom drop-tuned set, this is where players who actually own extended range instruments end up, and most 6-string players have never heard the name, largely because Kalium never bothered chasing that market in the first place. It's a small operation, effectively run by a tiny team rather than a corporate string division, and that scale is exactly why they can offer gauges the big manufacturers consider too specialized to be worth producing. Number 9. Stringjoy's Signature Series. Stringjoy started in Nashville in 2014 as the world's first true custom string shop, before it became a manufacturer in its own right, and the company still hand builds every set in-house, rather than mass-producing off an assembly line. Their signature electric set was developed with slide player aerial posen specifically to hold up under open tunings and heavy slide work without losing its top end. What makes Stringjoy worth knowing is the half-gauge option, a 9.5 set sitting exactly between a standard 9 and a standard 10, built for players who find one too loose and the other too stiff. That's not a gimmick, it's the kind of granular control a boutique shop can offer that a factory running standard production runs simply can't. Their Broadway's line goes the other direction entirely, rebuilding the string construction methods and materials common in the 1950s and 60s for players chasing a warmer, more vintage voice. Proof the company isn't just chasing novelty, but studying string history to inform what they build. Every set, whether it's a standard 6-string or a fully custom bass build, is still coiled one at a time in the same Nashville workshop, rather than run through an automated line, which is a genuinely unusual way to scale a modern string company, and one of the reasons Stringjoy keeps showing up on the boards of touring musicians who found them through word of mouth rather than advertising. Number 8. Cleartone's Monster Set, the 10 to 52 signature gauge built with Dave Mustaine of Megadeth. Cleartone's whole pitch rests on something called EMP treatment, a coating under 1 micron thick applied to every string in the set, thinner than most coatings on the market, including the coatings on Elixir's NanoWeb and PolyWeb lines, which most players already consider thin. Most coated strings trade tone for longevity, feeling slightly dead or plastic under the fingers. Cleartone's coating is thin enough that players consistently report they can't feel it at all, while still getting 3 to 5 times the lifespan of an uncoated set. Beyond Mustaine, players like Tommy Emmanuel and Chevelle's Pete Loeffler have stuck with these strings for years, and Cleartone strings even ship stock on guitars from Martin, Framus, Dean, Washburn, Siegel, and Epiphone, which means plenty of players have been playing Cleartone strings for years without ever knowing the name, quietly logging months on the same set that would have most uncoated players restringing every few weeks. If you already dismissed coated strings as a compromise between tone and lifespan, this is the set built specifically to change your mind. Number 7. GHS Boomers. GHS has been coiling strings out of Battle Creek, Michigan since 1964, a name built from the initials of its 3 founders, Gould, Holcomb, and Solco, and the Boomers line launched in 1975 under a tagline that hasn't changed since, the Power String. Nickel-plated steel over a round core, sealed individually in an anti-corrosion pack, straight off the factory floor. Boomers aren't some hidden boutique secret. They have been sitting on shelves for 50 years, which is exactly why they get overlooked. Players assume anything that has been around that long and that cheap must be a beginner string, when in reality, Boomers were the reference set for an enormous stretch of rock history, precisely because of that bright attack and powerful low end. The kind of tone a Fender Stratocaster or Gibson Les Paul absolutely comes alive on. Familiarity bred invisibility, and that's a mistake worth correcting. GHS expanded into guitar electronics as well over the years, but the string side never drifted from what made Boomers work in the first place. This is a company that has been quietly winning ears for 6 decades without ever needing to reinvent itself to stay relevant. Number 6. Curt Mangan's Round Core Nickel Rounds. Made in Cortez, Colorado by a small American company using a proprietary process they call fusion matched, tuning the core to wrap ratio on every single gauge rather than using one formula across the board. The round core construction is a deliberate throwback. Before the string industry shifted to hex cores in the mid-1970s, round cores were standard, and they give bends and vibrato a noticeably livelier, smoother feel under the fingers. Particularly noticeable on the wound strings in a set of 10s or 11s, where the hex core wire in a standard D'Addario or Ernie Ball can feel comparatively stiff. U2, Vampire Weekend, and Justin Bieber's teams have all used Curt Mangan strings, proof that boutique doesn't mean niche. Every gauge is sourced and built in-house in the United States, rather than outsourced to a bulk supplier, using American-made wire start to finish, which is part of why a company this small has ended up on the pedal boards and pickup selectors of players signed to major labels. Curt Mangan also still offers a genuine, pure nickel option alongside the nickel-plated set, the same alloy used almost exclusively through the 1950s before nickel-plated steel took over the market, giving players a way to chase a rounder, warmer vintage tone without hunting down actual vintage strings. This is what happens when a small shop decides the big manufacturers left something behind on purpose and goes back to get it. Number 5. DR Strings Dragon Skin Plus. DR was founded in 1989 specifically to reintroduce hand-coiled, round-core string making to the general market at a time when most of the industry had automated the process entirely. Dragon Skin launched in 2011 with a proprietary clear coating called K3, and DR made a decision most coated string companies still won't. They coat every single string in the set, not just the heavier ones, since most competitors only bother protecting the heavier strings and leave the plain strings bare. The K3 coating itself is applied before the wrap wire is coiled around the hexagonal core, rather than sprayed on afterward, which is why it stays thin enough to vibrate naturally, instead of deadening the string the way older coating processes did. Dragon Skin Plus later added what DR calls accurate core technology, microscopic locking grooves cut into the core wire that grip the wrap and let the string ring out fully instead of losing energy to a loose connection between core and coil. Musicians like Jared James Nichols and Dirty Loop's bassist Henrik Linder have both said publicly these are unlike any coated string they had tried before. And once you feel the difference between a fully coated set and a half-coated one, it's hard to go back. Number 4. Newtone Strings, hand-built in Derbyshire, in the heart of England's Peak District. This is about as far from mass production as a string company gets. Every single string passes through the hands of up to 3 different craftspeople who physically inspect it before it ships, and Newtone will build a fully custom gauge set to your exact specification if the standard options do not fit what you need, even though a custom order can take up to 2 weeks to complete, precisely because nothing is rushed off an automated line. One story sums up why players who find Newtone rarely leave. Stephen Stills tried a friend's guitar, strung with Newtone's masterclass strings, during a Crosby, Stills and Nash tour, asked what was on it, and ended up putting Newtones on 2 of his own Martin D45s for the rest of the run. That's not a marketing claim, that's a working musician switching strings mid-tour because the difference was audible the moment he picked up the guitar. Number 3. Thomastik-Infeld's Jazz Swing Flat Wraps. Thomastik-Infeld has been building strings in Vienna since 1919, founded by violin maker Franz Thomastik and civil engineer Otto Infeld, back when half the company's output was already headed to Britain and the United States. Allied bombing leveled the company's offices and production facilities during the Second World War, and production didn't resume until 1946, a full year after the war ended, with output only climbing back to pre-war levels by 1950. Jazz swing is a true flat wrap string, not the ground down or compressed round wrap strings some brands pass off as flat wraps, with a polished nickel wrap over a round core built specifically for the balance of fundamental and overtone that traditional jazz demands. George Benson liked the feel so much, Thomastik-Infeld built him his own signature version, and the same company behind Jazz Swing also makes Spirocore, the string's professional upright bassists and cellists have trusted for decades, which tells you the same obsessive engineering runs through their entire catalog, not just the guitar line. Players who have used Jazz Swing for years swear the tone actually deepens with age rather than degrading, the opposite of how every other string on this list behaves, and that alone tells you why jazz guitarists treat this set as close to sacred. Number 2. Rotosound's Roto Yellows. Rotosound has been making strings in Kent, England since 1958, founded by James Howe, a string maker who got his start building string coiling machines for a 32-string zither after falling in love with the instrument in a film. Roto Yellows carry what Rotosound calls the European eye, a longer ball end built for extra strength, wrapped in nickel-plated steel over a hex core for an aggressive mid-range that cuts through a mix. The player list reads like a history of British rock: Jimi Hendrix, John Entwistle, U2's The Edge through the 1980s and 90s, and virtuoso Guthrie Govan today. Oasis, Duran Duran, and Franz Ferdinand all reached for the same strings across 4 different decades, which tells you this isn't a passing trend, it's a specific tonal signature that keeps getting rediscovered by players chasing that same aggressive, ballsy mid-range. Rotosound also invented the wrapped bass string outright, and every set is still manufactured on the same factory floor in England, rather than farmed out overseas. Number 1. Pyramid's Nickel Classics. Pyramid has been hand-coiling strings in Germany since 1850, which makes every other name on this list look young by comparison. Their pure nickel wrap runs at 99.2% purity, built on a round core rather than the hex core almost every modern manufacturer defaults to, a direct callback to how strings were built in the 1950s and 60s. Pyramid even offers a set of gauges built specifically to recreate what Jimi Hendrix had on his guitar, reportedly a custom set closer to a 9.5 than a standard 10, developed after careful study of his rig, alongside a separate Monel line aimed at players chasing that specific 1950s rock tone. Staff still travel to music trade fairs around the world every year specifically to hear what players are missing before deciding what to build next, an approach closer to a small workshop than a modern manufacturer. And then there's the flat wrap rumor that refuses to die. Players and dealers alike have long claimed the Beatles used Pyramid's gold chrome flat wraps on their acoustic guitars in the studio, the giveaway being the complete absence of finger squeak on those recordings. Nobody has ever definitively confirmed it, but every guitarist who has used these strings understands immediately why the rumor is so easy to believe. A company that has been perfecting the same craft since before the American Civil War, still hand-building strings the same patient way, sitting almost entirely unknown to players outside a small circle of tone obsessives. If you found this useful, hit the subscribe button, because it helps these videos reach players who are ready to stop settling for whatever's sitting on the shelf and start finding the strings that were made for how they actually play.